partly vac metal, partly real. Today we're going to be opening up the Super 7 Ultimates toy version Silverhawks. It's Saturday, time to open some toys. Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan. Thank you for joining me here on the channel yet again. Today's video is one that I've been pretty anxious for. I've been excited to check these out in person because I've been very curious how they were going to turn out. Now, like many, I was hopeful when Super 7 launched their Silverhawks line that we were going to possibly see some very shiny Silverhawks toys. But of course, when the Silverhawks line first launched, much like they did with their Thundercats line, the figures were based on the way they looked in the animation. Now, it was stated at the time by Brian in an interview here on this channel that they would never be able to do vac metalized versions of these figures like the old Kenner toys were. And the reasons given were important toy industry reasons. Most of the modern super articulated figures we have today are made of a softer plastic. There's a lot more joints. Whereas these vintage figures that had the vac metal, they were always made of a harder plastic and there were a lot less joints. So that harder plastic is what the vac metal has to adhere to, plus less joints means less rubbing off of that vac metal. Well, it was not something that we wanted to hear, but it seemed to make sense at the time, though I think it could be argued that the versions that we did get based on the cartoon, even those folks were hoping would be a little shinier than they turned out, me included. Fast forward to last year's San Diego Comic-Con, and suddenly, there in the case, on display, was the thing we were told could never happen. Silverhawks Ultimates that were fully vac metalized. To be perfectly honest, I was a bit annoyed when I saw that, and I put Brian on camera and asked him a whole bunch of questions about it. You can check out that interview on my channel if you haven't already seen it. But here we are, almost 1 year later, and this toy version wave is now shipping and in hand. I did buy the whole first wave, and we're gonna take a look at them here today. So without further ado, let's check out the toy version Silverhawks. All right, here's our shiny, shiny, shiny Hawks in the packaging. No more slip covers on these. I think that's kind of become the norm with Super 7's Ultimate figures. So this is just how we get them now. And oh my gosh, just like, look at the shininess is amazing. I mean, like, I'm not even gonna lie, just seeing it in the packaging here and the way it's almost blowing out my camera because of the light just bouncing off of how metallic these guys are. This is great. I mean, this is what we all wanted from the beginning. I'm still just a little nervous about them, and we'll see how that plays out as we're opening them up here. So there's Quicksilver in the packaging. You can see the extra arms in the background with the wings spread. Same kind of accessories we got from the first release. The back of the packaging is really cool. You can see my reflection in it. That's how glossy it is there. But it's like a very, very glossy blue that's got the little bio for Quicksilver there. And then we've got Steelheart here, who, man, her color is amazing. Just like this really, really, really rad purple that's in this very, very shiny look. I love it so much. You can see they say toy version on there. Same kind of thing they did with the Thundercats. So they're basing these on the vintage toys. You know what else is back there? Can you see that? It actually comes with a little microfiber cloth so that you can wipe these guys clean. Keep your fingerprints off of them. That's kind of amazing. So same kind of thing on the back of her box. You can see it's that same glossy blue there with a sort of a cartoon silhouette of the character with the bio there. So yeah, we're going to be opening these up, I guess. Here we go. Okay, we're also going to be taking a look at the toy versions of the villains in this wave, which is Buzzsaw and Monstar. And first of all, just to like show you, I know magically this is back in the box for you guys, but I want to show you the scale difference with these here, because holy cow, the villains in this line are enormous and the boxes are so much bigger. So this version of Monstar is inspired by the vintage toy. So he's got that all bright red look to him. And then Buzzsaw, again, based on the vintage toy. So he's that green color, which in my opinion is so much cooler than the yellow of the first version that came out. I mean, I loved the Buzzsaw figure in that line when I was a kid. Like, that's one of my favorite toys from that era, and I liked it so much he got played with multiple toy lines. Like, he was regularly a Marvel villain for me because I thought he was so cool looking. So I'm thrilled, actually, to be getting this version of Buzzsaw. So we'll be getting him opened up. But again, real quick, just to show you the packaging, same thing going on, but it's red on these. Still very, very shiny. We got the bio. We got some cartoon images of the characters. Let's rip these bad boys out of their packaging and get a better look at them. All right, we're going to start with the baddies. Specifically, we're going to start with Buzzsaw here. And let me go ahead and I'll bring in the tape measure so you can see just how big this figure is. Because look at that. He stands over 8 inches tall. And in fact, if we are counting like the Buzzsaws on his shoulders, I mean, he's pushing close to 9 inches, but he's not quite there. I mean, you can just see, look at him in my hands here. He is a big, hefty figure. Now, I've always had a soft spot for Buzzsaw because the vintage toy is one that I loved as a kid. I didn't have a ton of Silverhawks figures, but I liked this figure so much that he was used in a lot of my adventures as a kid. Not this one specifically, the vintage one. Was used in a lot of my adventures. My Marvel superheroes fought him. Lots of figures fought him. I just always thought he had a really cool look. And I want to start off real quick here at the beginning with some comparison time action, because I do want to show the first release of Super 7's Ultimates Buzzsaw compared to this new Toy Colors version, because the yellow one here is inspired by the way he looked in the animation. The colors here are more inspired by the vintage toy, and I just think the vintage toy colors are so much better. It's much more striking of a look for the character, the greens and the yellows with the red eyes. I like this so much more than this. But you can see that it's basically a completely reused figure. I don't see any new tooling on the actual figure itself here. We do have a new head, which resembles the vintage toys action feature, but otherwise, it's just a repaint of what we already got before. But it does look a lot better. So if you aren't familiar with it, let's go ahead and run down articulation and all that here real quick. That head is ball jointed. In fact, we can easily pop that head off if we want to swap that other one on, which we'll do here in just a bit. These shoulders can also easily pop off socket. I don't know if that's really by design, but they pop right off anytime I try to rotate them there. They snap on fine. It's not like they're falling off, but like seriously, just a little bit of pressure, boom, pops right off. Basically, you're just going to get the forwards and backwards with this. You're not going to get a lot because of the sculpt of this guy. I mean, it's just gonna pop his arm off if you try to bring his arms out to the sides. Otherwise, he's got swivels at where his biceps would be. You got these huge round balls here at his elbows, but you got like a standard elbow bend there, and then you can swivel around the wrist there on the front. Also, the fingers individually rotate around in there, which is cool. All of the Buzzsaws spin except for the one on his head, but the shoulders and the hands, those all move. So that is really cool there. We can kind of swivel them there at the waist. You can see we got those ball-like hinge joints at the thighs there. So legs can go outwards, forwards, backwards. They swivel there. You do have a standard knee joint there. Kind of goes back and forth, kind of got a bit of a swivel. But again, the sculpt at the knee is bonking back and forth there. So that's going to keep it from moving all the way around. The ankles can go up and down. They can rock side to side. So it's decent articulation. I will say he feels sturdy. It's just real easy to kind of like the head pops off real easy, as you can see. It's easy to pop the arms out of socket, but otherwise, like, he stands good. He feels hefty, which I like quite a bit. He's actually, you can see he's got quite a bit of weight to him, so he feels like a nice, solid figure. So as far as his interchangeable parts go, he does have these swappable fingers here, which I think they're just like, you can just pop the fingers out of socket, and it's just so that he's got like these wider open fingers there. And I don't know if that's like, I think that might be, well, I don't even know is like the purpose of that, to be perfectly honest, because these are under the Buzzsaw there. So I guess it's just like, I don't know, open fingers. To be honest, not sure that's fully necessary. I do really like this new head, though. Let me bring that in. So this head you can pop on, and this is specifically to mimic the action feature of the vintage toy. If you are not aware, the vintage toy had a feature where you can chomp his head up and down, and it would make the saws spin, and it was a very satisfying feature. Also on this head, the saw actually does turn, which is pretty cool. This is probably the way I will display him because I think that looks the best. And then, yeah, he's got his little hawk there. He's got Shredditor, which is very cool. You can see he's articulated in a couple places at the wings. He also has a spinning buzzsaw there. So we can bring his arm, let's see if we can bring his arm up, and then he can just kind of like rest on his arm just like that. So there we go. That is Buzzsaw. Let's do vintage comparison time. Look, this is the figure I was talking about. This is still, honestly, one of my all-time favorite vintage toys. I love this thing. This is the chomping feature I was just telling you about. This is just a cool toy. Really well made, very cool looking. And then I do have Shredditor on the vintage one, actually like plugs on to his hand there. But there we go. There's these two standing side by side, so you can see what they look out. My vintage one's kind of got some weak joints there at the thighs. He's like falling forwards. But yeah, this is our new Toy Colors Buzzsaw with vintage Buzzsaw. And let me lift the head up there. There we go. There we go. That's what he looks like. I do like this quite a bit. I think this is a good chunky figure. Obviously, the articulation's slightly limited because of the sculpting, but I think those new colors are an amazing improvement over the first release. But again, it's all in personal preference, and I love this toy right here so much. Okay, so this is the Toy Colors version of Monstar, and again, just an absolutely massive toy. This figure is standing at 10.5 inches tall. He is even bigger than Buzzsaw. In fact, let me just bring Buzzsaw back in here. So like, you thought Buzzsaw was big. Look at Monstar. He is absolutely massive. It is ridiculous. So the head that we've got on him here is a new head that is inspired by the vintage toy, but of course he comes with swappable heads as well. Let's just go ahead and do a comparison time right here because I want to show you guys exactly why he looks the way he does. So this is our vintage Monstar toy from the Kenner Silverhawks line right here. So you can see that head is based on this. Now what the vintage toy did is it actually had like a head flipping feature similar to Power Rangers that would turn him to the more powered up head. And the way, of course, they accomplished that on the Super 7 one is with an interchangeable head, which works out just fine. You can pull the head off the ball joint, which actually comes off pretty easy. And then we can swap on the much better looking spiked head there. So there we go. Now we've got our Monstar, our Toy Colors Monstar, next to the actual toy that he's based on. And it's a pretty cool looking update, to be perfectly honest. It's just crazy how absolutely massive he is as well. He also does come with his little bat accessory, just like the vintage one there, which is pretty cool. So this dude is huge. Let me get a good look at that head sculpt there, which is very cool. Massive figure. I actually don't have the other version that Super 7 released, so I can't confirm, but I'm assuming that they did the same thing. It's basically just the same body as that one, and the joints on there function exactly as you would expect them to. Single joint at the elbow. We've got the swivel there, swivel at the wrist. Does look like, yeah, we got hinge joints at the wrist. They're pretty tight there. We got torso articulation as well as waist articulation. The legs are ball jointed so they can go outwards. Move forwards and backwards. You're going to have some hindrance there. Swivel and bend at the knee. And then the ankles there, you can swivel the feet. You can bend the ankles. You can also rock the ankles. I will say the joints in the legs all feel a tad on the loose side. I wish he was a little bit more sturdy, but he is standing under his own weight. So at least we've got that going. Aside from that interchangeable head, he does come with a slew of interchangeable hands. Like he's got some slightly different grips. Like this hand is open and this hand's a little bit more open. Might be a bit overkill on the swappable hands. We got some gripping hands. I like the pointing fingers. So these can be changed out just by pulling the other hands out of socket, which are actually plugged in pretty tight there. And then let's see, make sure we get the right hand on there. There we go. So we can do an open hand there. So, you know, easy to swap those out if you want to. And of course, as I showed you, he does have his sidekick as well, which can sit right there on his forearm. We just got to make sure we balance it correctly. I don't think it really clips on. There we go. But it's kind of shaped for the way his forearm is sculpted there as I'm just knocking it right off. But I don't know. There's Monstar. He is a big figure. I actually do, again, like the toy colors here. I don't know. I don't have the other version to compare. I will say he's massive. He's also the most expensive in this wave. I mean, this is an $85 figure, which is certainly hard to justify. All right, time for the main event, because this is what you're all here to see, right? Let's check out these VAC metalized Silverhawks. So these figures stand at the 7-inch scale. You can see Quicksilver is like right at 7 inches. Steelheart there is a bit on the shorter side. And again, these are figures that we've already got in their cartoon colors, but these are more inspired by the Kenner action figures, which were VAC metalized, meaning they were chromed, extremely shiny. And I think this is what a lot of folks wanted to see in their new Silverhawks, me included. But we were told for so long that it wasn't possible on a super articulated figure, and here we are, and now we get to test to see if this was really worth it, because I gotta tell you, these feel fragile. Now, I don't know if they are, but I'm like scared to touch these things. I'm scared of the VAC metal peeling. I'm scared of breakage. I don't know if we're going to get that or not. What I got here is these were included with the packages, but these actually came with little microfiber cloths here that are branded with the Super 7 logo. And I'm trying to open one of these up because I actually want to show you guys, like, the slightest touch on these is going to get fingerprints on them there. So I do think it's kind of funny that these were included, but I just saw a huge fingerprint already right here on the front. It's unavoidable. I really feel like even just right away before I'm even messing with it, these are the type of figures you're going to get out, maybe mess with once, find your desired pose, and then you're probably not going to touch them anymore out of fear of scuffing them up at the very least, right? So Quicksilver looks great. I will say the silver that's used on here, and I don't even know the right way to describe this, but it looks more like a shiny black than it does a shiny silver. Now, it is chromed, it's mirrored, like I can see myself in it. It looks great. It just looks darker than the vintage figure did. But I think he looks awesome. Like, the chrome is pretty dang amazing on here. The question is, does it hold up? Now, of course, there are exposed parts, like the face and the arm over here is painted with a skin tone, and it looks pretty decent. I actually think it looks better than the head we got on the first release of Quicksilver, and I'm going to bring him in here in just a bit. I think we got to kind of get a little bit of a stress test going on here, because we've got interchangeable parts, of course, because we've got the wing arms to swap on just like the first releases with some different hands as well. We also have the helmeted head that covers the face. I want to look at the articulation on here. Let's see how this functions. So it should be the same as what we had before. That head is ball jointed. It can look around. It's got a hinge joint, kind of goes up and down there. Maybe that's not a hinge joint, but it is a good range of motion on the ball joint. So hinges there at the shoulders, so the arms can go outwards, forwards, backwards. The arms on this figure are so loose, and they just kind of fall right out of socket. And you can see there's like some flaking already right there in the joint, which is to be expected on the joints, but the arm feels so loose it does not clip into the socket. It's worse on the left than the right, but both of them feel that way, which is really unfortunate. Swivel at the bicep, single joint at the elbow, which is tight, and oh man, that is definitely going to scratch that off. I can already see it starting to scratch off. Swivel, hinge at the wrist. Oh man. Yeah, see, this is the trick, right? And like, this is honestly what Super 7 was warning us about from the beginning. VAC metalizing super articulated figures is going to result in flaking. There's just no way around it. Like, that's why our vintage figures that were VAC metalized were also made of a harder plastic than we typically see on superposable figures, and they didn't have a lot of joints like this. So I think it's inevitable that there's going to be scratching here. Oh man, the legs can slightly go outwards, forwards, backwards. Looks like swivel at the knee, bend at the knee. Cool. The foot just fell right off that peg right there. See, I almost think that the VAC metalization process made these joints like a little, I don't know, like the sockets might be too big or something, and they're just not plugging in all the way. So man, I don't know. So let me just bring in Steelheart real quick. She's beautiful. Like, I don't know if that's coming across, but in person, gosh, that purple is gorgeous. The vac metal is beautiful. No question there. I think that she is just beautiful looking as far as that vac metal goes. I'm just worried about it. Let's do some swapping, shall we? Let's go ahead and we'll pull the head off that joint too there. And then we're going to do the winged arms. We'll pop those in socket here. And of course you can use whatever. There's different hands. So, you know, we've got like flat hands and we've got kind of like open hands, but I am going to go ahead and stick with the closed fists for this particular pose. This one over here doesn't have vac metal, so it should actually go a little bit better. And then we got the helmeted head. Let's pop that on the joint. And there he is. There he is. I mean, he looks awesome. He looks awesome. There's no doubt about that. I think the vac metal looks great. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with Steelheart here. The joint just popped right out of the neck on this one. Just right out of the neck. So now I'm going to have to do some extra work to get that fixed. Okay, couple things I need to talk about here as we're moving forward. First of all, what happened is the neck is coming apart at the seam over here. And that's why the ball joint popped out of the bottom of the neck like it's not supposed to. And number two, as I was just pushing her, I wasn't even using my fingernails, but as I was pushing the head back in, I scraped off that face paint. And you can see it's fully vac metalized underneath. So I already ruined the face on this one. So that is kind of the thing I was worried about. Again, like if you can get these the way you want them posed and pose them that way, they look awesome. But there is some serious risk there with the flaking and the paint coming off and the scratching and the scuffing and possible breakage. I mean, the way that that neck separated and the peg popped right out. And I think it's all due to this vac metallization process on figures such as this. Let's end this with a bit of a comparison time. I do want to show what they look like standing next to the other releases. So, for example, this is the first release of Quicksilver that Super 7 did, which is very gray and not silver. That's my Graverhawk figure right there. So you can see the huge difference. I mean, again, I'll point it out. The vac metal looks great. It looks like a completely different toy when you shine them all up like that. This is my vintage Quicksilver figure there. And like even that one, right, has got paint scuffing and everything where you can see vac metal underneath. But maybe you can see what I was talking about here with the darker colors. Like this looks a lot more bright and silver, while this almost has like this shiny black color going on to it, right? I think it looks cool, but it definitely stands out to me. You know, I hadn't even mentioned the Hawks yet, but we do have Tallyhawk with Quicksilver here. See if I can even get him to stand. He's just kind of like falling off the arm. Ah! Tallyhawk does not balance well. Okay, here's new toy colors. Steelheart next to the other release, the cartoon version of Steelheart. I don't have vintage Steelheart. She's on my want list still, so I can't compare the vintage figure. But again, pretty massive difference there with that vac metalized purple compared to the more metallic blue and silver of that animated version of the character. So there you go, my friends. That's my look at the toy version Silverhawks. Honestly, I have very mixed feelings on these. I think the chromed vac metal look is beautiful. I think they look awesome. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the vintage Kenner figures, and while I was never expecting these to actually happen, I think they look really, really nice. But I think that's really as far as I can go with it. I am afraid to really touch these things going forward. I think it's gonna be impossible not to scratch these up, to chip away the paint, to chip away the vac metal, and even those joints feel looser and more fragile than I would like them to feel on these particular figures. And the price point is pretty hefty on these, with both Quicksilver and Steelheart being at that $65 price point, which is $10 more than normal, and Monstar is like an $85 figure. And to be perfectly honest, as a consumer, on the consumer side of things, the price point doesn't feel justified. It's a really hard pill to swallow. Now, if you are perfectly happy with these, if you're perfectly happy with buying them and they look great on your shelf and you're not planning on touching them and the price point isn't something that bothers you, no judgment on my end. It was my job here to show you my experiences with them. You guys can make your own judgment call on these. I never like to sound like I'm being negative, but I do need to point out where there are flaws, where there are things I think should be done a little bit better, where I see them, and I feel like I did that here today. So the toy version Silverhawks are very pretty, but they are flawed. Thank you guys so very much for joining me for another episode here on the channel. If you guys enjoyed what you saw here today, please feel free to hit that like button. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you think I'm being too hard on them? You think I'm not being hard enough? I'm sure the opinions are going to be all over the place, and that is totally fine. Sound off down below in the comments section. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It really does help the channel out a lot. Also, a huge thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. You guys are amazing. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Until next time, my friends.